This is IBM Museum, and it's time to do some EduQuest EPROM captures. And I've got one of the trays of one of the unit back behind me on the bench. I've got all the components out, and I'm going through and I'm talking about, in particular, here's the EduQuest collection page at the Art and Tool. And if I can get to where I can interact with the page a little bit, I'm going through, and I'll scroll down just to kind of give a good overview of the areas. And I have a tray for the EduQuest 30 there on the bench. And then down towards the bottom, of course, the sound card, I do have that off to the side, does not have any socketed EPROMs on there, and that's an M-Wave chipset on it, DSP, programmable chip. So that's not really going to be in this area, but the token ring NIC that has the link there, and that's got a good page of information. If I could, okay, there go to click on things, scroll down, and content from YouTube's UXW Bill of the image, and he's got it marked on there with his name, and then the that BIOS chip, and I'll have to go through and check to make sure that my EPROM reader should read that, but I'll look at that, and that'll be part of this presentation. And I can go through, and I can probably also, that component list is pretty good, but I can go through and do images of that. And my token ring NIC, and I'll bring it up in just a moment, is a little bit ugly. It's got a little bit of rust and stuff like that in the bracket, and I've got to go through and clean the PCB a little bit more, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, one of the links here that is not shown on this page is there's the Ethernet NIC, and there's not any page currently for that, and of course also that EPROM image is not captured. That's just it's a D-Link board, but it is that reverse mount, so it's very exclusive to the EduQuest. You know, that it can't really fit much in anything else physically fit, or you can plug it in, but it's not set up best for any other adapter but the EduQuest. And of course, also, as I've mentioned previously, both the token ring NIC and the Ethernet NIC, those are also can be used interchangeably, or the modules that came with those network adapters on the 25SX, the PS2 25SX, even though that's a very uncommon model out there. But I do have the EduQuest 30 there, and I know that the component list here, and there's at least the components are marked for. We saw in a previous video that U46 is unpopulated. It's a 40-pin socket. And that's why I thought that ROM-in-DOS, or excuse me, the other way around, DOS-in-ROM, it would be in that. But it looks like IBM has adapted. And we'll get to see part of that adaptation and can analyze the images at some later point as well. But the U32 there appears to be the system BIOS. It's got some copyrights. I'll go through and I'll hold these chips up as I go through and extract them. And then the U47 and U33 on the other side of the riser socket are particularly interesting as well. And we'll get to go through and image those as well. And so I'm going to go through. First off, I'll hide my webcam picture, and we can go through and get the browser capture out of the way as well. I don't think I'll need to bring up that page again, but I have a link to interact with it at least. And so the really funny thing is I'm going through and I'm doing this tray that is just, it's pretty dirty. And that won't really matter because of the aspect of, I pull the chips, and as long as I make contact with the chips, it won't really make a matter much at all. And I'm doing that mainly because using this tray, just for the fact it doesn't matter for the chips, I've got other trays around that have the same EPROMs on the planer, the system planer, but it does have that future domain network adapter in there as well. And I intend to go through, and since it's got an IBM copyright on it, I'm going to go through and pull that chip as well. And I can go through, there's probably images of this particular adapter. I've also used a Trantor SCSI adapters that are just almost the same style as this entirely. And you'll see in this instance, I already have the sound card, that M-Wave sound card pulled out of the socket. I've gone through to where at least I have the positions, the sockets that those chips are in exposed, so I can go through and pull those out. And I'll have to use the screwdriver to get that adapter out. And then I also have, and this had, I mean, this is an Ethernet adapter from one of them, and I do have other versions of this board. As I go through and look at this EPROM, sometimes I'll show in a moment of the process I have to do to learn. I can guess at the capacities of these EPROMs, but sometimes it's just better just to read the chip itself. They have the labels over them, and I'll show how I typically peel labels on that. So that's the undocumented adapter at this point of the Ethernet adapter. And I've shown this on the previous video, probably on the live stream as well, that is a D-Link board. Ultimately, it has a D-Link chipset on it, but I need to get pictures of this. And this one is actually in pretty nice shape for all that. It's very clean and everything else, but I do have other ones of this. While the token ring board is, it's still a little bit grimy and got rust on it. When I went through for alcohol, that just smeared those images. And of course, it's got the green dot and it's got the 16/4 label on it still. It's still visible. But if you see just with the token ring board, you just see a blank green dot. It's a 4 megabit adapter. If it's got the 16/4 lettering on it, then it is a, you can set it to either be a 16 megabit ring or a 4 megabit ring, and all your systems on those rings have to be the same speed as well. And this is the 40 pin dip that I'm talking about. At least in this instance, it has the Toshiba part number there, and I'll have to go through and check on the list to make sure that my EPROM reader supports it. We'll go through, we'll get that plugged in. I should have enough updates on it that it's not going to complain too much about me. I will probably, and this is really just a side note rather than anything, I do have the network cable going still over to my Ethernet switch and still have the TCP configured on my tweener system for that internal network, but I've got the network cable. I can go through and I can get that live on the network, and once I have those images, to FTP up to the Ardent tool. And so at some point here, we'll go through and I'll switch over. I'm going to pull the SCSI adapter, the 8-bit SCSI adapter, just to get it a little bit out of the way of the EPROMs or EPROM that's below it. I have that one, what looks to be a system BIOS, and I could get at it from the edge, but that just gets it a little bit more exposed. And I have my little screwdriver to go through and pull it. So let's go through from the, since we've got the token ring board documented already, I'm going to go through, I'll pull this ceramic EPROM. And we didn't see it from me holding up the adapter before. We just work it gently out both sides. And this does have the chipset, the token ring chipset, the Tropic, the Tropic chipset, just like is on one of the microchannel adapters. And this chip sometimes gives issues under Windows 95, which Windows 95 could be possible for the higher level EduQuest models. And as I say, that has the part number, that TC57H1024AD, and then they have the speed. Yeah, it's having a hard time focusing on that. But at least it has that part number outside of the, from underneath the label. I don't have to peel the label in that instance. And fully justified up in my TLL 866 plus programmer. And we'll latch that down. And I will go through and we will switch over to the tweener system, and I will the software for the EPROM reader, and maybe one thing nice about the EPROM reader, even though I have the latest version of this, the application installed, without it connected up to the network, it doesn't go through and complain that it is not able to that the application needs to be updated, or it's not able to go online and phone home, basically. So we have that TC, and we had the 57, and these are organized alphabetically and numerically, of course. I could go through and do a search. It does look like it's got all the 58s. We have that following letter. Yeah, I see a 512 there, but I don't see, and I think the H, oh, it's giving me 57H. And that just brings up, so do we have E? And of course, I'm not familiar with the cross references. Major Tom is familiar with that sometimes, as far as, if I could. Okay, TC 57H. I don't think that there's a 1 in there, but I don't think it'd be expressed as a 024. So I may have to look up just to find out if there's a cross-reference that's better support. I know there are some Toshiba chips in particular. I have to remember that I was moving things around here and didn't have the camcorder view up. But yeah, that's a TC57H1024AD. Shows up real nice on that. And I can see if I'll just have to maybe be some later point I have to get set up to read that. And of course you want to be, I'll kind of halfway put it back in the socket. You want to get matched notch for notch just to make sure it's oriented right. And I have the ability, I could even review footage to see. Let's go through, let's pull the Ethernet, what would be viewed as the Ripple ROM, or it has the code to boot over the network, boot this network card over the network. In this instance, it would be using the iClass to the iClass server, one of the iClass servers that I have, model 95M, and so we can see the labels over most of that. And it does have some things, Malaysia and the programming voltage. And I'm not even sure on which side it is, but normally I just take a razor knife. I try not to nick the label itself, but you just cut under it. And I like to do my adapter pictures on, before I do this a lot of time, because you peel labels and the chip doesn't look as pretty afterwards. Yeah, I see a part number. But I wonder if I'm going to have to get out these are alcohol wipes. And this, of course, you want to have this sealed so you doesn't evaporate your, oh, and I just broke the lip of that. So your pads don't evaporate. But I always find getting that latch open is just something of a challenge, and hopefully I didn't compromise that fastener too much of that either. I don't know if necessarily if alcohol will go through and cut the adhesive, the goo, and a lot of these labels they're so loose with time as well. Do we have a visible part number? Yeah. So that's a 27C 128. And that's a fairly common choice in this case. And has equivalence with a lot of manufacturers. I can go through and I can do the generic. So notch up. Okay. We will go through, spent longer than 5 minutes apparently. So the 27C 128, and it shows all these different manufacturers. AMD is a good enough generic, and we have that DIP 28 pin, and it also lists, you know, the higher capacity there for below that, but we're going to do that. We're not going to do the PLCC format or anything like that. And let's go through, check ID, and we'll go through and read. Okay. And so now we have all that prettiness of the EPROM, and we will go through to save. I'm going to go through, and I think I already have an EduQuest. Oh, this is going through to where I don't. It defaults to the application directory, and I need to go through and see if I can change that in settings. So I don't have. I've got token ring, you know, areas else, but I'm going to go through, I'm going to make a new directory. We're going to say EduQuest. Okay. And we will go in there. We're going to do a, I'm going to do an Ethernet. I'm going to plan for the future a little bit here. For when I can read that token ring EPROM. Figure out maybe what the equivalent is for it. And we're going to do a, I'm going to do, for now I'm going to do a 30 directory, and I'm also going to do a DOS-in-ROM directory. And we'll get to those in a moment. So I have my Ethernet directory, and so what I do, the convention I do, is the FRU part number, which is 10G 714 on the face of the EPROM. And of course, I'm trying to show that on camera, and I realize the camcorder is not up. And it's going to do as a bin file extension. So we'll go save as. It tells us we saved it. So for all that, and we can just briefly kind of scroll through this to see. I don't know if necessarily any strings of information would be there, or if there's going to be any dates. Just kind of an end of item. So scroll all the way back to the top there, and we are done with that process. Again, notch to notch, get the alignment in there correctly. Okay. And we will effectively move on. We're going to go through, I'll extract. And I could go through and once I get to the the EPROMs on the planer, I could go through and even pull that riser just to get better access to them, or but give me just a moment to, and with time, these can actually go through and they can form even a metallic bond in these sockets. The pins have been compressed against the wiper of the socket for so long that they can go through and just kind of electrically bond together. So there's that future domain chip, version 1.10. And I could probably guess that this is going to be a a 27128 chip as well. And it's actually got a kind of an ovalized label there. And the EPROM itself, the label is all nice and pretty, and the card looks pretty sad, the adapter. But that, and I'm looking at dust and rust and things like that, that really, in the grand scheme of things, people would tell me that they can, that's able to be cleaned up. So there is the part number of that, and that's actually 27C64. And I don't think that the Q necessarily comes into play. We've got that band on that chip at least to show pin 1 in addition to the notch. And we will go through, we will select the chip again. We're going to go through. Let me see if that Q, yeah, and it might as well go as far as that for list some chips with that Q, and the 28 pin DIP again. The check ID and pin detect. We'll go through and we will read. Okay. So IBM F1 BIOS. I don't know how to make out that code below that, if that's like a firmware version, something else. And of course, this is not necessarily the same as the EduQuest BIOS, anything with that. So I'm actually going to just, I mean, I don't have to have it under the EduQuest directory, but I can go through and I'll just do FD. And let's do even. Well, I was going to mark it as 8-bit or something else, but that's fine. And it's not really marked otherwise. We'll just mark it as it's showing on the chip as well, IBM F1. And then we'll do a V110. Should be a real nice way to go through and mark that. I probably need to get in that directory. Okay, we'll go through the save and save as. Okay, so we have that saved away. So we're done with that level. I want to see how my recording time just passed a half hour. Looks like my audio is still doing well. I'll probably go through and review just to make sure that I didn't go to robot voice or anything. We will go through notch to notch to put that back in. I don't want to come up with a real lengthy video, but you know, people can go through and watch this at a higher speed. These some of these chips really creak with that bond that they have. Make sure I don't lose any screws. And this just has well, I guess it does have an upper. Pin for that. That feels okay. That's just a slot. I think, and I don't think it has a forward. No, yeah. It's all tied in there. I don't know if okay. So I'm not going to go through. It's kind of a false start for going through and pulling that riser. I guess I can just work around it rather than going through and pulling it up that way. We'll just put a little bit more effort into getting the EPROM. I don't even know if removing the riser would help me. Best help would be even to have the planer even pulled out of the tray. But of course that means of also pulling the riser as it is anyway. And this is even bubbled a little bit for the label. IBM Corporation, 1993, Phoenix Technologies, 1989 to 1992, Samsung Electronics, 1992. I didn't see the Samsung Electronics before, and the ATI Technologies. And ATI Technologies, that's the video chipset that is in there. Who knows where the Samsung aspect comes from? And this is a 32 pin. EPROM maybe? Oh, and that label's not going to peel very well at all. I don't see any identification on that side. And it went through and powdered on that edge too, so you got to see a nice picture of it. And this is marked as a A386 1.01. We'll have to remember that for this powdering otherwise, to come up with kind of the file name. And I do have other, and I'll bet you this is like a 512 maybe. I don't know if they did the, because it's probably got both the E and F segment. There's a part number on this side at least. We'll find out if alcohol in that pad is evaporating. Okay, so that's a 27C010A. And I think that is on the supported list. Notch denoting pin 1. Back over to the okay, so we will go through, select, and 010, and that 32 pin, and every time you change the part selection, it rechecks those pin detect and check ID, and there may be a way to adjust the configuration for the program to set default. Okay, so we see identifications as even VGA, BIOS, and we have a date there of the July the 10th as I'm taking it there. I don't think that that would be the 7th of October of but I'm thinking that that is the 10th of July 1993 in the grand scheme of things. We will go through and we will say save. This is going to go into the 30 directory, and as I say, we're going to probably do that A386 and what did I say otherwise for that? The version 1 point, so 1.101, and normally that's version 1.01, although you can't have periods in the file name. So that looks good, and we save that. So that is all that we need to do for this side of the riser. And that was, yeah, it says system BIOS underneath that for the, underneath the socket. So at least we know, that. And we didn't have the other side, and that's actually the interest that I had. Let's see if I'm, yeah, notch to notch. Always go through and double check yourself on pin orientation. It doesn't hurt to, you're halfway in, and you want to confirm and these I think are going to be a little bit of a challenge to extract from this side, and I have a lot of obstacles otherwise with this. And once I pull the one chip, I'll probably pull this one first. I'll leave it out so I can kind of get at the other one when the time, after I go through and read it. And I'd have to look at the diagram again to what, I can't really see silkscreen identifiers here. But I'll hold this chip up, and if they were anything, they would use the same size as the system BIOS for these capacities, the capacity of these chips. But I've had different chips at every, or maybe they'll be this identical between the capacities for the chips on this side of the riser. Just a warning, I'm probably going to run into about an hour of recording time, I'd estimate. I'll have to look again at how things are coming out. At least these aren't as close on the riser. And of course this side, that's all those reverse mount. So here is that label. ROM-DOS 01. And I hate to go through and peel all these labels, but I've got to go through. They're nice, pretty labels. You see them on video. In a dirty system otherwise. And I've got more 30s, and I think for everything, see there I cut the label. And thankfully this won't need, yeah, these labels I'm surprised for, they're not discolored, they're still stuck to the EPROM itself, but they go through and powder. They just demolish if you try and pull them off. Is sure having a... Okay, so there's another one. And I can probably, I'm not going to go through and pull the label on the last one. I can probably guess that these are going to be, and especially for them being the 32 pin, pin 1 notch. We kind of confirm. We go back, and the nice thing on this time is we will not have to change that chip, the chip selection, and we don't have these check marked at the bottom, so we can just go immediately to read. Okay, back. Okay, so we even see some clock $, aux, COM. We see some device names under DOS. And so this would even qualify. This is going to be and as I say, these normally, as I understood it, were PC-DOS 5. It's showing that 5.00 revision 01. I'm taking that to be the DOS version. And I am going to, it should be easy enough for me to go through and mod, or I even should have a module around that I've already modified, the real-time clock module, so that I can go through and get the system booting up, and we can try and boot into this ROM-DOS. I'm just trying to page through, just looking for other possible strings. There'll be the ability to analyze this. See, there we had internal stack overflow, system halted. Other, we're just looking kind of for some strings. There's the HMA not available, high memory area. Loading, and it says DO, and then it has that bracket, you know, for loading DOS. Error, cannot allocate memory for whatever text. I mean, they have these strings interlaced sometimes. This will be kind of neat to see it run and to go through and analyze a little bit. And I'll go through and mark up the video description just so this gets identified that it is kind of a DOS-ember theme. You see high and low. And that's just going through the brief start of this. So MS-DOS, so it is a Microsoft version rather than the IBM version. MS-DOS version 5.00, copyright 1981, Microsoft Corporation, licensed material property of, and so that 1981 date, of course, is, and then it has an end date, that 19.91, it's 1991, is from the IBM PC up until later. And again, we see those device identifiers, DOS device identifiers of null, con for console, aux, PRN for printer, very cool stuff. Talks about buffers, device high, files, AST drive, multi. So you have the almost like a, I wouldn't think it'd be a clock driver. It has something about AST drive in there. There's your switches. Unrecognized command in. All this stuff, if you kind of see it, of what DOS would be on an EPROM. Large file missing. And certainly I don't intend to have, to spend a whole bunch of time. Warning. Logic drives. In this, and this file will ultimately be available. I'll go through and start to saying the appropriate people on analyzing this. Okay, there's your ROM-BIOS-sys and ROM-DOS-sys. Specify location of ROM-DOS-ini and config.sys. ROM disk. So we will go through. We're going to save that. We just looked through a small little fraction of, for strings and everything. We're going to do that DOS-in-ROM, and in this case, I think I'm going to do it with that. And let me look at the other chip. Yeah, so this is, and the other chip is even marked as the U47, but I'm going to do the ROM-DOS-01 identifier that it has on the label. And we just have to remember Okay, and we won't even have to change the directory or anything else on this next one. Again, I'm looking at time. Just past 50 minutes. So we're going to have, and I'll just set this aside. I'm not going to socket it because it's going to, I have to go through and use that space to get at this other one. And we're just going to take it as an assumption that this is a 27C010. And it's going to be another, it's the U47. Boy, that thing is just creaking. See if I can get in from the exposed. And that's just too high of angle. I should have gone through and considered pulling these from, pulling the planer out of the tray. I think would have given me a lot. Just being careful we don't bend pins. Work slowly. Work different sides. And that came out well. There's the label of what that is. And that's got that Future Domain Corporation ROM disk. U47 ROM disk. And that 01A. And we will go through to confirm the notch for pin 1. Switch back over to the system. We were so quick that time it didn't even launch the screensaver. We've got all the part number and everything else good that we can just go immediately to read. And looking through, and the program goes through and it selects the area that you're in. See here we can see some areas of some of the strings. Saw some interesting stuff flash by. Oh, there we go. Okay, wow, we get a whole bunch of stuff. Hi mem, DOS XMS driver version 2.78, and date of 09/1991, being 1991. Specification version 2. Copyright of Microsoft. Shadow RAM. Talk about VDisk. So there's some real cool text. Let's go to the top of that. It's marked with the revision. We don't see the strings at the top like we did with the other one. But I'm going to go through and I'm going to save that. We're going to go through and we're going to call this, as it's labeled, ROM disk. And just remembering that's at U47 spot. We've gone through. And now we have that saved. This will be on the so on the system, EPROMs, and it's all in alphabetical order. We have our EduQuest. There's our DOS-in-ROM, 128 KB for both of those. excuse me, the 16 KB image for the Ethernet, the 8 KB image for the future domain SCSI, the 128, so that's probably the E and F segment of the system BIOS there, all in one chip. And then we have our token ring is unpopulated for now. And maybe I can learn a comparable chip to that. So we are still just under an hour. If you enjoyed this content, I apologize for the length of this. I didn't go through and pause at any point or anything like that. But I thought it was fairly interesting. And if you enjoyed it, go ahead and click on that like button, please. And as always, subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, please. And recommend that to your friends so that they can subscribe too if they're interested in this sort of content. And I'm going to cover this stuff. I'm going to go through and tag this video as a DOS-ember video. It has that ROM-in-DOS. It's going to be a little bit of a before the close of the month, but I should have a modded module. That should be the only thing I should need to get one of these small 30s working, is just go through and swap out that real-time clock module to get it operational and boot into that ROM-DOS. That's not an everyday thing that you see, and so that should be some to do at the end of the DOS-ember time frame. So, but this is IBM Museum. That's all I have for now. Thank you.